David, there's something that I have to tell you. Because even though we haven't seen each other in all these years, still can't believe you consider me a friend.
Why's that?
Because we haven't the slightest thing in common. You have such precise thoughts, ideas that you turn into reality, and you amaze people with your ideas. And they call you the most extraordinary thing, an artist, and they're right. David Byrne is an artist.
Well, you did that when you were performing.
Fuck I was, David, the fuck I was. I was a fucking pop star. And I just wrote dreary songs because they were all the rage and made tons of money. Just depressed songs for depressed kids, and two of them, more fragile than the rest, ended up doing themselves in as a result of it. And now I go to a cemetery once a week to appease my guilt, and it doesn't make it better, it makes it fucking worse. And then my wife asks me why I don't play anymore, and I think she must be a fool, but then she just loves me very much, which makes her more of a fool, because she doesn't know what a disaster her husband is. And that's it, David, that's it!
A modern day remake of Matthew Vaughn's Layer Kick, a Coen brothers end up with Timothy Chalamet. A Citizen Kane prequel, a Midnight Cowboy sequel, Alvin and the Chipmunks deserving of the squeakquel. There's so many new ways to revisit sideways, but a graphic novel is how we choose to update. But we still hold fast, you can't change the past on the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Sometimes it's a form of love just to talk to somebody that you have nothing in common with and still be fascinated by their presence. This sentence is a quote attributed to musician, author, and filmmaker David Byrne. Born in 1952, Byrne gained notoriety after forming Talking Heads in 1975 with friends Chris Frantz, Tina Weymouth, and Jerry Harrison. Their music remains an important part of music history, and Byrne still tours to this day, playing Talking Head songs to sold-out audiences over 50 years after the band's formation. And many of their songs have been used in films, which is why we on this podcast are even talking about them. Wild Wild Life can be heard in Brother Bear, Over the Hedge and Zookeeper. Road to Nowhere plays at the end of Little Monsters. Psycho Killer plays during memorable scenes during Summer of Sam, Bloodshot, and A Private Life. Burning Down the House can be heard in Revenge of the Nerds, Transformers Rise of the Fallen, and Nymphomaniac Volume 1, and Once in a Lifetime is featured in the film Down and Out in Beverly Hills. And the films Lars and the Real Girl, Wall Street Money Never Sleeps, Crazy Stupid Love, and He's Just Not That Into You also feature the same Talking Heads song, but only one claims it as its title. Greetings, Starfighters. This is Ruined Childhoods. I'm John, joined as always by my brother Dan. And in this episode, we're talking about the 2011 Paolo Sorrentino comedic drama, This Must Be the Place, the story of an aging rock star experiencing arrested development who goes on a journey talking to people he has nothing in common with, but is fascinated by their presence. Dan, how would you describe your Talking Heads fandom?
Wow. Okay. Wow. What a great question. So I'm a pretty big Talking Heads fan, though what's interesting is I don't tend to listen as much to their albums, like straight through.
Yeah.
I have enjoyed their albums, but the first Talking Heads album that I owned was their double disc Sand in the Vaseline greatest hits compilation.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry. That is actually not true, because the first Talking Heads album I owned was the soundtrack to Stop Making Sense.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it was actually a live album. So that
live
was
album.
how and that I listened to a lot, and that was how I came to know a lot of their songs. And then Sand in the Vaseline. And then since then had, collected and listened to their albums, if not physically, then at least digitally, and grew to love. But I think I grew to love so many of their songs through Sand in the Vaseline, through that compilation. That was certainly how I first heard This Must Be the Place, Naive Melody,
Yes.
as it's parenthetically called.
The parenthetical, yeah.
Yeah. And also David Byrne himself, I was a fan of his solo work. I had gotten his album Ray Momo, which it featured. So I first got to know this the song that he recorded with Celia Cruz called "Loco de Amor," and it was on the soundtrack to the film Something Wild, directed by Jonathan Demme, who directed Stop Making Sense. And, Jonathan Demme and David Byrne, had kind of a partnership. I know Demme was involved in True Stories, which Byrne wrote and directed and stars in. And he, David Byrne, so I also was a fan of David Byrne's solo work and kind of became a fan of that as I became a fan of Talking Heads. And, having grown up in the 80s and gotten into pop music in the early 1980s, Burning Down the House was huge.
My God. And it's so good.
It's such a wonderful song. And I mean, of course, there's so many, you can, talk to 100 Talking Heads fans and ask them all their favorite Talking Heads song and get 100 different answers.
Right.
And there's not I would say it's funny, the only time I've ever heard of someone talking about a Talking Head song they didn't like is the band Radiohead, who got their name from, as they described it, their least favorite Talking Head song.
Well, to say your least favorite Talking Head song doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad song. It could just mean that of all
point.
Of the amazing songs they've written, this is just their least favorite of all the great ones.
That's absolutely. And so what's your history with, and by the way, I appreciate, saying Talking Heads as, I made a note at some point in the movie. I was like, the name of the band is Talking Heads. That's why they named one of their, I think it was like a live compilation. The name of the band is Talking Heads.
Yeah.
So, what's your history? What's your history with Talking Heads?
So I actually have a really vivid memory of my first time hearing Talking Heads, and at least consciously hearing Talking Heads, because it's entirely possible that I would have maybe heard one of their songs on the radio or in a movie. I'm trying to remember if this memory I have predates Little Monsters.
I was going to say Little Monsters as well, iconically for us.
So, and that could have been the first time that I heard it, but the first time that I heard them and was like, what is this? Okay. As I mentioned earlier, Dan and I are brothers. So when I say we and our house and stuff like that, it's, it's because we grew up together. And, but this story actually involves our other brother, Scott. And there was a time when our brother Scott was playing music. I don't know if they actually technically were a band or if they just kind of like to goof around and play music together. I remember they wrote some songs, but a friend of his, yeah, Scott's in Talking Heads. No, Scott had a friend, Eric Richardson, and really funny guy. I always really liked him, and I hope he's doing well. But he and Scott played music together in our basement. And I remember he brought over a Talking Heads tape or CD or a mixtape that had Talking Heads on it because he wanted to play Psycho Killer. And I was down in the basement with them and I heard Psycho Killer and it was just like, what is this? It was something that felt so different from what I was used to hearing. Blending English and French lyrics and that like super simple but impactful bass line is just like, ooh, it's so good. And the melody of the song, the way that David Byrne sings it, it really struck me in that moment. And at that moment I became a Talking Heads fan. And I do own a few of their albums on vinyl. They're 77 and some of their other, the whichever the one is that does have Road to Nowhere on it. And it's
Little Creatures,
yeah. And I just
cover.
I really love them. I have you ever seen David Byrne perform live?
I have not. I have seen David Byrne perform live, but it was within the context of a Paul Simon concert.
Oh, okay.
And so this is the story. The only time I've ever seen David Byrne perform live was at Webster Hall in 2011 when I went to see Paul Simon, who scheduled a show at Webster Hall. It was recorded. I don't think David Byrne appears on the live recording live in New York City. This was released and the concert was aired on PBS. But David Byrne came out and they did 2 songs together. David Byrne performed "You Can Call Me Al."
Oh my God. He's the only person I really want to see perform "You Can Call Me Al." And it's one of the Paul Simon songs that I really like. So
if you can, I think it's not too difficult to imagine if you just imagine David Byrne performing "You Can Call Me." You may ask yourself, how did I get here? Oh no, sorry, that's sorry. Yeah. I'm like, sorry, I was getting confused with the lyrics of "You Can Call Me Al," but anyway, and then they performed.
A man walks down the street, he says.
Yeah, a man walks down the street, he says, "Why am I short?" Right, that's why I was getting the questions from. I just asked the wrong questions. Why am I short of attention? Got a short little span of it. Yeah, I'm not going to go on. But and then they did "Road to Nowhere."
Wonderful.
Yeah, that was the and Paul took the lead vocals on that.
That's nice. That's
so
really nice.
It was very special, especially because when they were setting up for the encore of the show, and this is when David Byrne came out, we saw that they were setting up 2 microphones for vocals, and that one of them was taller than the other. And I had been speculating.
Chevy
I was
Chase?
like, I had my hopes set a little higher because I was naturally hoping for Mr. Arthur Garfunkel.
I mean, when you're setting up 2 microphones and you know that one of them is with Paul Simon, it could be literally anybody else that the other microphone's going to.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
Especially if it's higher than the other one. You know?
Yes. This is
not
true.
going to be 2 Paul Simons is the only thing that you know for sure.
This is true. But I was very specifically because I had been, knowing that they were going to be filming this concert, and it was kind of this special like add-on show at Webster Hall.
Yeah.
I was really thinking like, oh boy, because also he and Garfunkel were supposed to tour together, and then I think it was had remembered hearing it was because of Garfunkel's throat that he couldn't do the tour, but I was like, but he can come out and do one song, right? Like, come out and do a little like Mrs. Robinson together. Right. But look, I was not disappointed that it was David Byrne, because I had never seen David Byrne perform live, and I have not again since.
A notoriously impactful performer, and somebody that that when you're going to see David Byrne live, you're going to see one hell of a show. There's going to be something different about it that you've never seen anybody else do. And that's kind of the magic of David Byrne. And we'll get to the movie in a moment. I did just want to share, I've only ever seen him one time, and it was again a collaborative type of situation. This was when he was touring with St. Vincent, when their album that they did together came out, which I really, really liked.
It's a great album.
And it was a really wonderful show. I was at the Greek Theater in LA, and they played, a bunch of songs. I think the single from it is called Who, which is amazing. And they did a bunch of songs from the album, and then they did a bunch of St. Vincent songs that David Byrne was also like playing with and singing on and everything. And then they did a few Talking Heads songs. The one I remember is Burning Down the House. Burning Down the House.
They did a Steve Martin, Queen Latifah collaboration, Bringing Down the House. They did some scenes from it.
Eugene
Levy got up. Eugene Levy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, Burning Down the House, and it was such a good show. And when we talk about David Byrne, and we're really talking about something that comes up in the movie This Is the Place, because David Byrne does appear as himself in the movie, and in the context of him being a true artist. And in this moment, we are seeing him demonstrating this organ, this real organ that he created, that where
Right.
the theater itself is the organ. And it does require a little bit of background knowledge going into the scene, or additional
I remember
reading.
when he did that.
Yeah, but like additional reading about like what this is all about. Otherwise, it's just like something weird is going on with a bunch of strings and pipes and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's all in the context about him being an artist, and Cheyenne, the character that Sean Penn plays, feeling like a fraud and saying like, I was never an artist, I was a pop star. And in a really moving scene that I absolutely loved.
It's
But,
a lovely scene.
yeah.
Yeah. Well-
So Dan, was this your first time seeing This Must Be the Place?
It was. And
Okay.
yours?
I saw it when it came out, and I remember liking it, and I feel like I liked it a lot more the second time around.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you feel about the film?
I found it so interesting, and I know that sometimes is a way for saying, well, like
I don't have a
didn't
better way
like
of saying it other than interesting.
No, that's really what I thought it was, because also, like I'm approaching this movie thinking about like it's a movie that is largely set in the United States, and when it's not in the United States, it's in Ireland.
Yep.
Written by Italians, directed by an Italian.
Yeah.
With and the story behind this, by the way, is that Sean Penn had been the jury president at the Cannes Film Festival when Paolo Sorrentino's film Il Divo.
Yeah, have you seen Il Divo?
I watched. I didn't have time to watch the whole thing, but I
wonder
watched.
if you watched the same amount that I watched.
I would say I watched about like half of it, just like kind of to get the style of it.
I did the same exact thing.
It was very much like political thriller via Guy Ritchie, like.
But it's
like
a true story.
Drama. Oh yeah,
of true stories. It's a true story.
Yes.
So a lot of it to me felt like homework, but like done in a really beautiful way. But since it's all in Italian, it's like extra homework because you're having to read it and follow all of the different people that it's trying to explain to you who they are. And so, but it's beautifully done and really has a really fun energy to it. And
you know what?
an extremely intriguing story.
And you know what movie I feel like it definitely was inspired by that we have covered on this podcast? Z.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say Z.
I really got like kind of like hyped up like Z vibes from it.
Yeah. If anybody checking out this episode hasn't seen the movie Z or listened to our episode on it from 1969, Greek film.
Yeah.
I think Italian Greek kind of a thing. Man, what a movie.
What a movie. And Il Divo definitely, and I saw it and I was like, you know what? I get why Sean Penn said to this guy afterwards, like, look, whatever you have coming up, whatever you want to do next, I'm in.
Yeah,
I want to be a part of it.
And I'll kind of piggyback on that. I did watch the panel discussion that Paolo Sorrentino and Sean Penn and a whole bunch of the producers and writers and actors participated in at Cannes when This Must Be the Place was shown there. And they were saying, yes, Sean Penn said that he wanted to, work with him. And what ended up happening was Paolo Sorrentino had he had two different ideas that he kind of blended together. One of them was like a Holocaust story, like a present day story related to the Holocaust, and finding a Nazi that is living in America in the present day. And then there's this other story of this rock star who is basically a man-child, somebody who is 50 years old, but kind of has the mentality of somebody, under 20 probably, and kind of blended those two together and created this. But Dan, why don't you do a little synopsis before we get even really in the weeds? Because I know we have a lot that we want to probably talk about with this.
I also, you watched the panel. I have the press packet from the Cannes Film Festival with all these interviews on it. So we definitely have the background. But yeah, it's what's interesting is
Look at us doing homework.
Yeah, I know, right? Hey, you're always a learner. You're a lifelong learner.
Yeah. This is a fun one to learn about.
And you know what? You know who else is a lifelong learner? Chayenne. So here's a little bit about him.
Absolutely, yeah.
After his music influenced two of his fans to take their own lives, a veteran pop star named Chayenne tried to find meaning and resolution by retiring and moving to the Irish town where the boys had lived. 20 years later, after the death of his estranged father, a Holocaust survivor, Chayenne goes on a road trip across America to find and kill the Nazi who had tormented his father at Auschwitz. As Chayenne, of course, the aforementioned Sean Penn.
Yeah.
As his also American wife, Jane, the wonderful Frances McDormand.
God, how could anybody dislike Jane in this movie? She's so great.
Oh, she's a firefighter.
Yeah, she's just the coolest person.
Yeah. As Nazi hunter Mordecai Midler, we have Judd Hirsch. As Mary, a young girl in this Irish town who has formed a bond with Chayenne, we have Eve Hewson. And as Rachel, the granddaughter of Alois Lang, the Nazi who's being hunted down, we have Carrie Condon.
Who is amazing. I mean, in 2011, when this came out, who would have known what she would have gone on to do?
She's wonderful in this.
So good.
And two very, very special, important, significant cameos by, you said David Byrne. We talked about David Byrne. Harry Dean Stanton, who his presence in this, I think, is really significant on a couple of levels.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more. I want to talk about the word cameo for a second. I feel like David Byrne is most definitely a cameo, but I feel like that word is used a lot when it's really just an actor playing a role. And I feel like it's a cameo when the actor who's playing it has a significance to being placed in it. Like, in Dude, Where's My Car, Fabio has a cameo. That it's not just like any actor. David Byrne most certainly is a cameo role in this. Harry Dean Stanton, I feel like, is an actor playing a role.
Yes, and it's also significant that he's in it because this film also has, and just like Il Divo has in its DNA, it's got Z. This movie has two movies in its DNA that and one of them I identified by Sorrentino as an inspiration. The other one, though, is hasn't mentioned. So Sorrentino specifically cites David Lynch's The Straight Story as kind of a tonal inspiration for The Straight Story, about a man who is played by Richard Farnsworth, who rides a tractor, I forget how many miles, but it's to go see his brother who's dying, who's played by Harry Dean Stanton.
Right.
And Harry Dean Stanton is also part of Paris, Texas.
Okay. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because in the Cannes panel discussion, an American journalist, I forget who it was, asks Sorrentino if there was influence from Wim Wenders going into this because of Harry Dean Stanton being in it, and also, the tonal nature of it and everything. And he was like, no, he's like, I love Paris, Texas. So he's like, perhaps it is just kind of like, part of my subconscious a little bit, but it's not a direct, there's no direct connection between the two. So it's funny that you mentioned, as soon as you mentioned that there were films that, and I was like, who's going to say Paris, Texas for sure?
Well, and that's more of just like, honestly, like that was one of the ones that thought of, and there were a few other movies that this reminded me of that I don't know that he was I mean, it reminded me of even Cowgirls Get the Blues at
Totally.
points. So, but it felt like Paris, Texas, as kind of this, exploration of the lives of people who live in these places that are not big cities. And the reason that goes into why he wanted to, what was pushing him about the former the Nazi criminal. And that, like, as he describes it here, it says, men who now have the tranquil features of harmless, good-natured old people, but whose past is marked by the unnameable crime par excellence, the extermination of a people. It's a diametrically opposed image. And we'll get to it later, but I do really appreciate the resolution of that storyline.
Absolutely. And I don't really want to spoil how things go down, although it may be tempting, because I feel like this is one that perhaps people haven't seen or have been curious about seeing. So if you're listening to this or watching this and you haven't seen it, definitely check it out, but we'll do our best to hold back on what really happens. It's not like a huge life-changing reveal or anything. But,
if we could just, if we can just say that Lang, the Nazi, one could argue, and I certainly felt this way, gets his comeuppance. And in a way that feels really appropriate. Yes.
For Cheyenne. And
yes.
Yeah. So let's kind of go back to the beginning of things and talk a little bit about just the kind of look and the feel and the sounds of the movie. I mean, David Byrne also wrote music for it, and so you kind of know going into it that's the vibe that you're going to be feeling. Cheyenne, for anybody who hasn't seen any of the materials with this movie, the look is modeled after Robert Smith from The Cure, and it's very blatant. I even remember when this movie was being made, there was maybe some photograph taken of Sean Penn, and there was speculation that it was a Robert Smith biopic.
Right. No, and that's another thing that Sorrentino talked about, in that like he had gone to see The Cure a lot when he was younger, and then he went to go see The Cure like a few years before making this movie, and was like, wow, Robert Smith is still, and like even when he's not on stage, wearing the has the hair and the makeup. So it was the idea again of like what drives a person to adapt that as their persona, not just their stage persona.
Yeah. Well, and in the case of Cheyenne, it's somebody who's reluctant to move forward and is cursed by these things that happened in his life. As we learn, he has this generational trauma and is unable to really reconcile with that. And throughout the movie, we see those elements chipping away little by little. Yeah.
To your point, and talking about the visual style of this, which, is very, inventive and definitely inspired by some of those, Lynch vendors, other Jarmusch people who are, like more of those artistic visual storytellers who work the poetry in. And the film opens, the opening shot is of the dog wearing the cone, which I just thought to myself, like, okay, that's going to mean something. And it was after I came back and I was like, well, why do you put the cone on the dog so they don't lick and reopen, aggravate their wound? And that's what this movie is all about. It's about the healing and the, like, which wounds, like, reopening the wounds. What is he doing?
I'm so glad that you're bringing that up, and that you watch this movie thinking about what everything means, because as I was watching it, I feel like I remember you saying that you hadn't seen it before, and I was watching it and I was thinking, oh, I really hope that Dan isn't experiencing this movie and seeing what I would call like the Napoleon Dynamitification of a lot of movies, where
No.
it's like quirk for the sake of quirk, and
No.
because I knew that it
No,
wasn't, and
no.
also yes. So I'm so glad that you are seeing the things that I was hoping that you would see. Yeah.
Well, and I think it helped. First of all, I said, I was thinking about it and I said, had I seen this in the theater, I don't know that I would have appreciated it as well as I was being able to sit at home and feel like, okay, I can analyze this. I'm watching it more out of curiosity than some sort of excitement. Like, I'm finally getting to watch. This must be the place.
Yeah.
And also knowing that this was a film about America and an American done by Italians, I felt, well, there's going to be a lot more, there should be more visual communication.
Well, and Sorrentino
the universal language.
Yeah, and Sorrentino, who was a cinematographer, that there's going to be some, beautiful visual language going on in this movie. If you know that about him,
and
but yes, there's a European, sensibility to it that.
But even in the dialogue,
American films.
A lot of the dialogue is, I think, more poetic than it would be if an English-speaking screenwriter had written it. Not a knock on them, but I feel it just felt like the kind of, writers who are not writing in their first language, their native language, what are they going to, how are they doing this? And, it helps that you're writing about a songwriter and an artist, somebody who is maybe more used to communicating in metaphors.
Yeah.
Not that we get too much of an indication of what Cheyenne's music was like. I think we basically just, I think you just kind of guess it's kind of like The Cure.
It's safe to assume. Yeah. But also we get like nuggets of information where it's like, okay, so we see that there was this concert that they played with Talking Heads. So there, perhaps there's some like post-punk new wave thing going on. We hear that Mick Jagger performed with him. So it's like, okay, maybe this is more of like a straightforward, like rock and roll type of band. I like that we don't hear it because it lets us use our imaginations to kind of fill in those blanks.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it was really
Although I really do want to, I do want to hear Cheyenne and the Fellows. Like, I would really love to hear it.
Cheyenne and the Fellows, which, and admittedly a take on Susie and the Banshees.
Yeah.
Or kind of a tribute to Susie and the Banshees.
But luckily it's like, it's enough degrees removed from it where you don't just fixate on that. Although him looking exactly like Robert Smith does make you kind of fixate on The Cure.
And a little like Susie.
True, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, the glam rock, there's some Adam Ant in there. Yeah. So just speaking more about like kind of the visual language of everything, clearly we see him, he's all black, but he's frequently in these places that are, counter to the, it's just constantly subverting our expectations of the places where he's going to be. Shopping malls, like greasy spoon diners, and this is just when he's in the place where he's in the town where he's living, where we see frequently, shots of these, these old houses, but built right up against them and behind them is this gigantic stadium that's made of like curved glass and everything. So
it's almost like the location from My Left Foot, but it brought, like that was that.
Yeah, was that Dublin?
That was my reference point. I mean, possibly. Yeah. But like that type of like architecture and those type, that common, small, UK, like not villages, but towns.
Right. Yeah.
with this big stadium.
Yeah, it's
right there.
it's a really striking image. But you see him like in one of the first moments of the movie. You see him. You're introduced to Cheyenne. He's putting on his makeup, his armor. And you see him walking down the stairs, and there are these black carpeted stairs, and they land on this like white like marble tile floor, and it's like he's exiting his kind of zone of safety and stepping foot, and he's living in this house that Jane, his wife, has a lot of influence on. The kitchen doesn't look like a kitchen that he would have. It's very new and modern. It says the word cuisine on the wall, which is really fun, which he mentions, and it's really funny.
He just kind of drifts through the house.
He drifts through the house. Yeah, you see him at one point, just sitting in his undies, reading a magazine or something. And I think he's eating apple slices, which is really funny. It's just so bizarre. And, we've talked about Sean Penn a little bit on this podcast before, but, obviously talking about a lot of Sean Penn. So that is to say, we know and we acknowledge, look, dude has not had the cleanest record when it comes to the way that he treats people. And there is that. Sean Penn does, however, have a lot of really admirable qualities when it comes to, world peace and, working, fighting for Ukraine. And
where was he when they were calling his name to win the Oscar? He was with Zelensky and Kyiv.
Who we love. So, yes, certainly
he's complicated.
Has some very dark marks in his, personal life, but is a very complicated guy. And we are also just coming off of his third Oscar win for One Battle After Another. And I'm so glad that we're talking about this movie after One Battle After Another came out, because these are two movies where he has developed new ways of walking to build these characters.
Yes.
Colonel Lockjaw walks unlike any other human I've ever seen, and it tells you everything about that character. And the same thing with Cheyenne. He finds a way to kind of hunch himself and take these little steps, and the way that he, is either dragging his suitcase when he's in the United States or his like grocery cart when he's in Dublin. The way that his body moves, it's masterful, and it makes me appreciate Sean Penn so much when I see an actor like completely embodying this character that's nothing like them in real life.
I really agree, and I felt like watching this and what he does with the voice, which it feels. I went from like Capote to. And then like Michael Jackson, which it feels in terms of especially the kind of Arrested Development thing, maybe perhaps is more intentional.
Okay, I hadn't thought about this until you just mentioned that, but years ago I listened to an episode of This American Life, and they were talking with somebody, this woman who spoke with a very high-pitched, childlike voice. And the kind of the narration was explaining, there was like maybe an interview with like a psychologist or something saying that when somebody has abuse in their background, that is a very common trait, is for them to kind of not progress vocally and not to mature vocally. They kind of keep this very childlike. It's not to say that every single person who speaks like that has, abuse in their past, but that's a very common thing. And I do wonder, and what we know about Cheyenne and his upbringing, I don't know if we know much about the mother, but the father was not accepting of his lifestyle and his life, and there's a lot that, the father didn't necessarily say to him, but, would say
there's
to, like,
a lot
Judd
that we
Hirsch's
don't.
character.
There's a lot that we don't know, because he just said, my father didn't love me.
Yeah.
My father didn't accept me. And this started when he was, a teenager, and he started to wear makeup.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that, and we know that the father is Orthodox, at least very conservative
Well,
Jew.
yeah, I mean, as we said before, Holocaust survivor.
Yeah.
And, I feel like I do a lot of kind of filling in my own blanks to explain certain things in movies like this. And the way that I interpreted all of this was like, this is a Holocaust survivor, and the next generation is living life not appearing to appreciate the sacrifices that were made. And that's the way that I interpret it.
Well, and I'm so glad that you brought this up. So I have a couple.
Dan, do we love this movie?
I think I mean, yes, I think we love this movie because it gives us a lot to talk about and it's interesting. And is it like hitting in all areas? Is it the perfect movie? No, but it's different. But coming back to this idea, and this is where again there was another movie that it brought to mind for me, The Jazz Singer, which I've never seen the original. I've only seen the remake with Neil Diamond and Laurence Olivier,
which I haven't seen, I have to admit.
But it's totally worth watching. And it's where again, like, Laurence Olivier is cantor. He's cantor in a Orthodox Jewish synagogue, and Neil Diamond is he's like a secret pop star, and then he just goes and becomes a pop star. But it's all that negotiation of, like, what I wrote down, honoring like their children who their parents don't see, as honoring the struggle, the sacrifices that the parent made for the child to have the freedom to pursue their dreams. And I mean, Jazz Singer, the father, I don't think he's not a Holocaust survivor, but likely somebody who fled and escaped pogroms, fled Europe to escape some form of anti-Semitic extermination.
Right.
So, but I thought about that, and then what I thought about, and I don't want to, again, there are specifics of the resolution, but I thought about, and this was after the fact, after finishing the movie and hearing, what happened and how Lang had tormented, which I mean, if we don't need to discuss it, we don't need to, but that he, was, at least psychologically tormented Cheyenne's father and humiliated him.
Right.
And it felt like, I wonder if the father saw him putting on the makeup and thinking about, they're going to tear you apart out there. They're going to, they're going to sick the dogs on you. They're going to they're going to humiliate you the way that they did to me.
Well, though it is hard to say, because then we now in the future know that things turned out okay as far as Cheyenne's acceptance publicly, but that's
right.
At the time,
but when it's, because this would have been in like the 1970s, and again, in assuming that Cheyenne, and whose real name we never learn,
and
but
I'm happy
grew
about
up.
that.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. Grew up in this conservative, ultra conservative, Jewish home in New York, presumably. It looked like Queens, if I had to guess. And just knowing that, like, okay, this is what's waiting for you on the other side of that, of that door.
Right.
Like, almost that, like, if it's going to come from somebody, I'd rather it comes from me, because it's coming from a place of love, which is, kind of weird to think of that rejection is a form of love. But I also thought about just the experience of Holocaust survivors who, in the 50s and 60s did not necessarily want to talk about it.
Right.
And they allude to this a little bit about the whole, like, I always thought that was, my father said that was his phone number. He wrote his phone number down.
Yeah. The tattoo on the arm. Yeah.
Yeah. And thinking about how survivors, many of them were not open about their stories. This is something
Right.
Art Fleischman does really well in Mouse. Part of the story of the graphic novel Mouse is how he just gets his father to I'm sorry, Spiegelman. I said Fleischman.
Right.
How he convinces his father to start talking to him, but this is when he's an adult. So of course there's that lack of understanding of what his father sacrificed because he just doesn't know.
But one of the things that I do want to talk about, and this has to do with Cheyenne's, I guess, motivation to, I guess, take action and to connect with his father, even though his father has died. But when he sees his father's like diary and it's all of these illustrations, these drawings, it made me think about how he had that conversation with David Byrne about being an artist. And I'm wondering if it made him see his father as an artist just like him, not just like him, but, somebody who has, artistry in their bones, and that's the way that they communicate. And I'm wondering if like he kind of saw that in his father, and it kind of gave him this connection and this desire to do something. Because, okay, this movie really stays with you.
Yeah.
And for days after I was watching it on this most recent watch, I was thinking more and more about the things that Cheyenne does and how it ultimately leads to this, cross-country American journey to find this Nazi who tormented his father and do right by him. And throughout the movie before that, you see him attempting to do all of these things to try and solve these little problems. Because what we know is that there were these kids who killed themselves. I think they were brothers who killed themselves after, inspired by Cheyenne's lyrics. And of course, he's living with that guilt. So I'm pulling back the curtain. I wrote the synopsis, and I wrote that he moved to the town where they lived. Although thinking about it, I don't remember if that's actually said in the movie. I think I may have. Was that actually said in the movie?
He goes to the cemetery once a week, and the parents are there. Like the parents are there, and they see him. I was putting two and two together that he moved there to be by that cemetery, and because of his trauma from that. The person who read the synopsis prior to actually reading it on the podcast, there was not that was absolutely, and there's a little mystery at first. They don't. It's something that Sorrentino I want to also credit his co-screenwriter Umberto Contarello. Right. What they do really nicely is they don't reveal everything.
No,
and they
this
leave
movie
you just
lets you
with
put
questions.
these together. But so what I was saying before is that you have Cheyenne trying to do these little things to try and like help people. These kind of like these tiny little micro things. So like Mary, who is Eve Hewson's character, who is you wonder, is like, okay, is this his assistant? Just kind of friend. Hard to say what their relationship is exactly, but
I assume daughter at the beginning, though.
I think that we're meant to assume daughter, but no.
Yeah.
So there's this waiter at this restaurant they go to, Desmond, who has a crush on Mary. And so he's trying to like play matchmaker. Like he's trying to do something for Desmond. He's trying to like help people in these tiny little ways. He's in the elevator with all of these women who are talking about, makeup tips, and he interjects, and it's almost just like he's exhausted of doing these little, microscopic versions of help people. And he's just like, it's all about the foundation. The brand doesn't matter. It's all about what's in it, and and this is how you do it.
To put some powder on it was so that your lipstick stays.
So lipstick stays on all day.
You have to put powder on your lips first.
Yeah. So he's doing all of these tiny little things. And when somebody actually does ask him for help, the guy who's in this band, the Pieces of Shit, asks him to produce their album, he's reluctant to do it. And it's just like, he's not willing to actually do real work to try to like help somebody out. He's only doing these tiny little things to try and help people out. And
Right.
once he sees kind of this future laid out for him after going to the United States, it's like doing this is such a huge fucking deal that he's actually taking the effort to go and do all of these different things. And he's traveling to many different states that aren't very close to each other. So
No.
yeah, he's all over the place.
He's driving, he's ruining one car and just
Well, and that's another one. So first we see him driving this black pickup truck, and because he put oil in it and might have put too much in it, the car catches on fire, and now he's driving a red truck. So that's just another example of like chipping away at the black of his, his armor and revealing the colors. And this is in this bright red, the same exact type of truck, but just a bright red version of the black one that he had before. So it's just
it's the red, it's that rawness. If you think about a burned skin, if you peel it, like, and the raw red underneath, or just, the blood of, peeling back a scab. Sorry to be gross, but
no, totally.
But that's totally what it goes right back to the beginning with the dog with the cone. There's so many other, just to come back to the visual symbolism in this, the ideas of, he talks about his vices in the past. And like when you see the giant whiskey bottle, like billboard that's blocking the road and that they're lifting up, and just like, cause he had stopped drinking.
Right.
But it's constantly being put in front of him, and it's not that he doesn't backslide. He doesn't all of a sudden become an alcoholic on his trip, but
he does take a drink at one point though.
He like pounds some Jägermeister.
Yeah, right. It's Jägermeister. Yeah, and it like dribbles down his cheek and stuff. What's also in the whole thing about him not ever not starting smoking, he's like, I just never did it. I never felt like I was old enough to do it or whatever, which is just
that's what so Mary's mother says says children don't get, it's once you're an adult and you have to deal with adult shit that like you want to smoke. She's like, you're still a child. That's why Mary's mother is also dealing with the loss of her son who has run away. We don't really get much information about that. We know that he's gone, and I think we're given as much indication to know that he's not dead, but that she's waiting for him to come back. It's very vague,
and it's left ambiguous, I think, on purpose, just because it's like, it doesn't necessarily matter. What matters is that, what matters is that she's, tortured and mourning and, just unable to break free from her routine of just waiting in the anticipation of maybe something happening. But anyway,
she's like Cheyenne, who's just kind of like waiting, and like Cheyenne, like, you pointed out the walk that Sean Penn uses. He's just kind of shuffling through life and not really affected by anything because of the only problems he really gets involved in are these little surface issues, and and there's nothing too deep until he comes back and decides to really delve into pursuing his father's tormentor.
Really, a really wonderful story.
And I really got the feeling that Sean Penn was like, I got the feeling that he got to play a little bit more with this role, and thinking about other roles that he had been doing leading up to this, thinking about, Milk, Mystic River, 21 Grams. I know there's a lot more in there in the 10 years preceding this, but not that this isn't heavy, but it feels like he
was
gets
Milk
to
before
play.
this? What year
Milk
was
was before this. Milk
Okay.
was 2009.
Oh, okay. So right before, pretty much.
And while I love him, I do need to point out there's another actor who I thought, damn, I would have loved to have seen what they would have done with this role.
Okay.
Paul Rubens.
Oh, interesting.
I would have loved to have seen it, like Paul Rubens, the actor.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen, and I'm not saying like instead of Sean Penn, I'm just saying like in an alternate universe, this movie made with Paul Rubens is something I want to see.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Paul Rubens, who, if anybody has seen the documentary that came out about him after he passed away, that was made while he was, still alive for the most part. We just learn how tortured he was and how all of the different struggles that he had beyond the ones that we saw publicly. And that if he
There's
was going
so much
to bring in a dramatic performance, it was going to have some weight behind it. This is somebody
like
who's
there's
really
so
gone
much
through
he
it.
could have, and maybe it's not something that he would have wanted to do. And of course, the character was written for Sean Penn.
Oh,
so
yeah.
there was never anybody else who was going to play this role. But as I watched it and I just thought about it, I said, oh boy, this would have been Paul Rubens.
That's really interesting. I never would have put that together. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It just.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're already almost an hour into this, so I feel like we should talk a little bit about what we would do given the opportunity to kind of revisit this one. It's, a pretty recent movie as far as movies that we cover go, but, 2026 or whenever you're listening to this, people, like, Dan, what would you do with this one?
Okay, well, I had two ideas, and one of them is more of I wrote it as it's a prequel about Cheyenne crossed with a jazz singer remake, and it's kind of the story of him becoming estranged from his father and his family and seeking out stardom. But actually, the idea that I thought about that I'm a little more interested in wouldn't necessarily be created or connected to this.
Okay.
It would kind of be a dual narrative story where you'd go back and forth between the two narratives. And narrative one is the creation of a song and the inception of a song, the writing, the recording, the release of it. The second narrative is the discovery of the song and the fan embracing the song. And yes, I think that the idea of like people who have taken their lives, naturally it's not just a song that is going to do it. There are other things, but there are other factors. But the story of somebody who discovers this song, a song that is written with whatever intentions that it's written with, but certainly not the intention of inspiring someone to take their own life. But seeing somebody embrace that song and make that song integral to their being, which so many of us have experienced at some point or another, even if it's just like, oh, that's my jam. Like, that's just like, we take music personally and there's certain songs that we take to heart. And it feels like the eventual dual, I guess, climax of each story, the eventual success of this song paired with the result of it inspiring an act as powerful as suicide and the message of, I guess, do we how powerful is music,
Dan, you're describing the plot of all three Bill and Ted movies, I think. So in Bill and Ted Face the Music, they travel through time and get Cheyenne to help them write their song.
Well, except it's the opposite, because instead of a song that is supposed to be this, and that this is where it's kind of like they set the bar too high. It's like, what is the one song that's going to, forever unite humanity and bring peace to the world? Unfortunately, it's much more palpable to talk about a song that leads somebody to
Right.
and there's a positive side of the story as well. It just feels like a more powerful statement, because there's the positive side of somebody who takes a song and they make that part of them, and it drives their success and drives them to become successful in whatever world they're successful in, because they, maybe it's it's Man in Motion from St. Elmo's Fire, and someone was like, what, I heard that song, I'm like, I'm gonna be that Man in Motion. Like,
sure. Yeah.
Well, all I need is this pair of wheels.
My sax. Yeah.
Whether it's that or like the song, a song that leads someone down or that doesn't lead them down a dark path, but
right.
accompanies them down a really dark path. And I guess to me, it felt like much more of a statement to have a film that climaxes with the dual celebration of it's the number one song in the world, or it's gone platinum, to are we going to really put these lyrics on our child's gravestone?
Yeah, well, that is a choice the movie made that I don't know how realistic that would have been, but
yeah. That's what I'm saying. There's definitely a few things about this movie that are, don't entirely hit the mark. But that's
sure.
I think that's what this movie inspired in me.
Okay.
That story, or hey, more commercially viable, type of jazz singer remake about a goth pop star, and their relationship with a conservative parent. So door number one, door number two. What do you think? What do you want to do?
This is a really tough one, because I mean, I like where your head's at, but also I like that this movie is a movie about a musician where we don't hear the music, and that I think works in its benefit in so many ways. To do something different with this movie, I really felt like it needed to be something completely different. It relies too much on the scenery to work as something on stage, I feel. It's not something where I'd want to see a prequel, because we know what we need to know about the past. It's something where we don't need to see a sequel because the story has ended. And it's one of those where, I don't know, we get just as much of this character as we really want, I think. Would it be fun to see Cheyenne in the past, in his prime as a musician with the rest of the band? Maybe, but I don't know. I just don't think that that's really where I want this one to be going. But I feel like there's a good way to develop a lot of elements of this story and focus less on, you just mentioned the things that didn't quite hit the mark with this movie, if this were done just as a graphic novel. I think that's a good way to do it, because it is a movie about a lot of things, but artistry is one of them. And what better way to do that than, with illustration? And I don't know. I feel like this one is a more challenging one for me to kind of think of, whatever to do with it. But I think that as a graphic novel, it would be really nice.
I think it would really work as a graphic novel. There are a lot of shots that directly would work in the format of a graphic novel. Does Cheyenne look a little like Sandman? Maybe, but there we go. That's you cut me off right before I said
it. Let's keep Neil Gaiman out of this.
Indeed, we should. Yep. It's yeah, and it's funny because you talked about it being on stage, and that definitely occurred to me, and how you could do various things, and like you'd have Cheyenne basically on stage the whole time, and everything else would move around them.
Yeah.
But I agree. I don't think it. I don't think it works. What
Unless
does it
you
become,
do
a Talking Heads jukebox musical?
No, God, no. Unless you do
No.
kind of like a My Dinner with Andre type of situation, and it's really just, Mary and Cheyenne, I feel like they're the ones that have the strongest like emotional core. I don't know, but no,
I think
no, that's not
I
it.
think you need to have the different places, and you need to have Cheyenne set the juxtaposition of Cheyenne in all these different places. He goes to the biker bars, or just the little,
Well,
it's not really a biker bar, but
well, and that's, when I was, writing the intro for the show, and I was like, okay, well, what's sentences? Because this season of the show, we're doing all movies that have titles that are full sentences. So the intros, I'm doing stuff with sentences. So I was like, all right, well, what are some good quotes? There's some good stuff in the movie. What about like David Byrne quotes? And there's that's like the big one that comes up for him is, love is, just having a conversation with somebody that's surprising, whatever. And it made me think about this movie. Maybe think about the conversation that he has with the guy that's all tatted up, the tattoo artist, another artist, in the bar. Then there's also the Harry Dean Stanton, which you wanted to talk about.
Give him a shout out there. Gordon Michaels is the name of the actor.
Yeah.
He's got a ton of credits. If you go, I went on his IMDb to look. He was in like Air Force One.
Damn, cool.
little role in that. But I loved that scene. I thought that scene was
I thought it was great.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought the scene, just to like shout out, like there's just some other scenes that again, would work really well in the graphic novel when he meets the wife of.
Oh yeah. Didn't love the whole goose thing. I thought that was a little strange.
That was a little weird. That was weird for weirdness sake, because
that was one of those things where I was like, I don't know about that.
Well, there's that, and also like the guy like dressed as Batman walking across the street in that neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah. That's where I felt like there was like a bit of a Napoleon Dynamitification going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't quite go that far with it because I was enjoying the movie too much.
Yeah.
But it was more of just like, are we trying to take a page out of like a David Lynchian? Are we trying to do something like that? But honestly, like after that scene, they really gets back to the basics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it goes back to, so I really felt like, it was a really, I'm glad to have watched it.
Yeah.
That was really interesting. I thought the way that the song is used throughout was meaningful.
Yeah.
This must be the place.
Yeah.
It was, I thought it was meaningful.
It's a beautiful film to watch too.
Yeah.
It looks great. It sounds great. I feel like people don't give it enough credit. But
no,
if anybody out there,
I can't think of another movie where you could see Judd Hirsch break through a door.
There you go. Well, if anybody listening or watching has an idea of how you would want to bring back or revisit This Must Be the Place, let us know. ruinedchildhoodspod@gmail.com. You can check out ruinedchildhoodspod.com for a lot of fun stuff. This season, as I said, we are doing movies that are complete sentence titles. Dan, what's our next complete sentence movie title?
All right. So our next complete sentence movie title is... It begins with a conjunction here, but it still qualifies. But I'm a Cheerleader from 2000, directed by Jamie Babbitt, with a screenplay by Brian Wayne Peterson, starring Natasha Lyonne, Clea Duvall, Melanie Linsky, Dante Bosco, RuPaul, Kathy Moriarty,
Mink Stoll, Bud Cort.
Oh, yes, Mink Stoll and Bud Cort as well. Yeah, I mean, ton of familiar faces in there.
Also the guy from Who's Harry Crumb, whose name escapes me. I think he's the And anyway, whatever. We'll talk about it on the next episode.
John Candy?
Dan, as you
No.
are stuck in traffic waiting for a giant bottle of booze billboard to go up, I wish you a good journey.
Good journey.